Hello, welcome to the debate on Sky News. I'm Martin Stanford. Here's our take on developments brought together from America, the UK and around the world. Hillary's inconvenient truth. What was the real reason for not using her state.gov email address?
I wanted to just use one device for both personal and work emails instead of two. It was allowed, and as I said, it was for convenience, and it was my practice to communicate with State Department and other government officials on their .gov accounts. So those emails would be automatically saved in the State Department system to meet record-keeping requirements, and that indeed is what happened.
2 weeks until Nigeria's elections, what's being promised about security, terrorism and corruption? And you decide. How clear are the blurred lines between Pharrell Williams and Marvin Gaye that cost $7 million? Hillary Clinton confessed but failed to fully explain why she used her private email account while Secretary of State. Republicans have accused her of blocking transparency. In other words, trying to hide something. In a moment, we'll speak to a former Clinton aide, Bob Weiner. But first, as usual, the Democrat commentator Jeffrey Robinson is standing by in New York, and Conservative commentator Armstrong Williams is joining us from Washington, D.C. Armstrong, several email accounts for a Secretary of State. What's wrong with that?
You know, to say that for over 4 years you never strayed into the realm of the classified is absolutely absurd. Nobody's going to believe that. I mean, I think she even compromised national security. She compromised classified information. She should turn her server over. She should have never deleted any of these emails. It should be transparency. It's outrageous if you're going to use your personal email. It's almost unheard of. And there's no way that the New York Times and its lead story today, the Washington Post, papers that are usually very supportive of the Clinton and the Clinton and their goings and comings are going to defend this. I mean, just like the Washington Post said in this editorial this morning, it was not the best for the rule of law. It was always what is convenient and what is in the best interest of Hillary Rodham Clinton, with no respect and no regard for the law and the position that they placed her in. And there's no way she should be running around deleting anything. Obviously, she had access to things that were on her personal email. Can you imagine using your personal email account as Secretary of State? No more needs to be said. It's just outrageous and indefensible. And she should turn over the server so an independent panel can decide exactly what happened and what she was using it for.
And Jeffrey Robinson, does this mean she's unelectable?
No, it means the GOP is completely full of crap. I mean, the Republicans come up with this. Instead of governing, which is tough, they go after Hillary on emails, storming a teacup. They go after Hillary for Benghazi, no proof whatsoever. And those are the excuses you get from the Republicans. I mean, Armstrong summed it up pretty well why they're absolutely a bunch of bums. First of all, he says it is unheard of. Nonsense. Every Secretary of State since the Clinton era has used a private email account, including George Bush's secretaries of state. The idea that she has deleted things, she has not deleted things. You know, email is two people. There are her emails to someone or someone's emails to her. The second half of those emails are all on servers. Third of all, there is no security breach. She was using President Clinton's secure email server, which is guarded by the Secret Service. Third or fourth, she said she will turn everything over, including her personal emails. I mean, what is the problem here? It is just a storm in a teacup generated by the Republicans, who are a bunch of bums.
Well, let's bring in Bob Weiner for his perspective. Former Democratic strategist, of course, former senior White House staff under Clinton, so he knows a little bit about protocols. Was this a mistake in your mind, Mr. Weiner?
Well, as someone who was subpoenaed by Ken Starr, and the New York Times credited me for being the first to expose his overreach, this is certainly overreach. You know, I'd like to make some news here. Colin Powell, as Jeffrey just said, all secretaries of state, deleted all of his emails, And yet he was said that the biggest mistake he ever made was what he had to say in front of the UN, where he lied, and he didn't know it was a lie at the time. He lied about them being nuclear tubes when they were simply vacuum tubes. He was given false information. I think the media and AP, who just sued today to get Hillary's emails, should sue for Colin Powell's server. Let him turn over his server so that we can get how furious he was about being forced to lie by the administration. And then we'd have some balance here in terms of what's out there. Hillary has turned over all of her emails, 55,000 pages, to the State Department. So what is wrong? Nothing. As Jeffrey just said, every Secretary of State has had a private email account. So this is full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. And if you think that by victimizing the Clintons you're going to win, try again. Bill Clinton left office as the most popular, 70% president in history, higher than Eisenhower, Kennedy, and all of that. He was the most popular. And they went after him, and you could substitute the words about sex. Here, Benghazi and all that, it's about being president. That's all the Republicans want to accomplish, is to attack Hillary.
But Bob Weiner, it does seem, doesn't it, that perhaps the atmosphere created by the misstep, if indeed a misstep it is a bigger deal than the misstep itself. It smacks of secrecy or something to hide or not dealing with authority correctly.
Well, I'd love to see those emails about Chelsea's wedding and the death of her mother and her yoga. I mean, those would be fascinating to me. But every single person in federal service, myself included, had to make the decision as to whether you delete or you don't delete your emails that are personal and whether you use a private or not account. So that's so discretionary. It's the trust you have by being elected and the power of being elected and the power of being appointed and the cross-checks. You know, so there's nothing wrong with the Freedom of Information suits and all of that. But there's no secrecy here. Hillary turned over 55,000 emails, all of what she deemed as her work-related emails. Colin Powell turned over none and deleted them all, as I said, including the build-up to the Iraq War, which the American people still consider the biggest fraud that it was ever perpetrated on them for no weapons of mass destruction. And when Colin Powell testified in front of the United Nations, nuclear tubes that were actually trash tubes. So let's get all the facts on the table. If they're going to subpoena in Congress and force the release of Hillary's server, which they can't do, by the way, as Trey Gowdy even said this morning, that's their personal house. You can't go in and invade things. But if they're going to ask for her personal server, let's get Colin Powell's and everybody else's and get all those American history important documents.
Armstrong, do you accept this is an opportune moment for Republicans to attack Hillary Clinton?
You know, you may be confused listening to both your guests, but I'm certainly not confused because the last time I checked, the GOP does not own the New York Times and the Washington Post, and it was the New York Times that broke this story. And they can sit there and talk about all that rhetoric about how great and pure the Clintons are and how Colin Powell. This is not about Colin Powell. This is not about Republicans. The fact that Mrs. Clinton violated her duties, and she got to delete the emails with her advisors, so they got to decide what was personal and what was not. And I don't think most people should even trust the Clintons and their advisor in this situation, that somebody else should have been in that room, somebody who's independent. Now, you can make this out to be some kind of witch hunt, but let me just tell you, the New York Times, if you read their stories on the editorial page, this is not some witch hunt. There's a very serious issue here that is at hand that Mrs. Clinton is very aware of. And if she thinks that her little cutesy pie press conference yesterday and her little lapdogs that we're listening to this morning are going to make this go away, it is not going away because she's not telling the truth.
Jeffrey, she's not telling the truth, says Armstrong.
We have some integrity. It's not a matter of lapdogs. We have some integrity. And as I said, the New York Times credited me for being the first grand jury witness to come out against Ken Starr's overreach. So any more than you would want to release your emails on some attacks that the media made on you, you remember those a couple of years ago, you know, there's some things that you don't want out that people have the right to erase.
Well, why don't we debate then what the New York Times and the Washington Post and the elite media is saying? What is that issue here? Instead of bringing Republicans and Colin Powell, let's debate the issue. Why do you think, why have they made this a headline story if there's nothing there? Are you saying the media is stupid and should be doing something else? Come on, give us a break. How dare you insult our intelligence as if this is some Republican witch hunt? This is the media that's taking her to task. Address what they're addressing in their articles. There is a breach here. there may have been classified information that hackers may have been able to tap into.
Okay.
There's a lot at stake here, and we should know what it is.
All right, Armstrong, hey, take a few seconds out. Jeffrey, come in.
Nonsense, utter nonsense. Of course it's the GOP generating this. And who says the New York Times is always right? I certainly don't. The fact of the matter is that emails are a two-part thing. Anything that might have breached, so in Armstrong's fantasy world, security, there's a copy of it somewhere on a State Department or a White House server or someplace where it is available. I mean, this is utter nonsense. Bob is totally right.
Jeffrey, let's just hang on a sec. Let's just nail that down. The point is that it's not on the White House server. It might be on President Clinton's own server. It's on a private server. It might be lying around on Gmail for all I know. Isn't that the problem?
No, you have to send that email to someone or get it from somebody. Right. It's on other servers as well. It doesn't just exist. The fact of the matter, and this is something that is very important for everybody to understand, emails never disappear. You cannot delete them because they are always somewhere else. They can be found.
Which brings
and
up,
what
by
the fact of the matter. Go ahead, Bob.
Well, which brings up, you're so right. I come back. Let Colin Powell give up his server, and let's track that for the build-up to the Iraq War and his feelings about how he had to lie at the United Nations with the talking points that the Republicans gave him about the aluminum tubes that he had to say were nuclear tubes.
You're absolutely right. This is strictly political. It's a storm in a teacup going after Hillary because the Republicans have nothing else. They can't govern. They're bums.
Okay, Jeffrey, I'm going to throw this line at you first, and let's let the others come in. The one I accept, let's accept as a premise, then that this is overtly political, and it's about the Democrats' #1 candidate for next year. Is it the case that without Hillary, if they can damage her, there is no other candidate? I know a few other people are having a nod at the presidency, but there's nobody really strong apart from Hillary, is there?
No, you can't say if because she is the candidate and they can't damage her. Interesting thing, the person who started this was Jeb Bush, who said, I've released all my emails. And it's in a direct contradiction to the truth because he, in an interview, said he was getting several million emails a day. He's released, I think, 50,000 or 500,000. He's released less than a day's worth of emails. So Jeb Bush is responsible for this. It is strictly political. The GOP has nothing else. They've got to go after Hillary. And it is absolute empty rhetoric.
And of course the Democrats have a bench, by the way. Of course they do. I mean, I love Hillary, and I'm a very strong supporter of her. But we have Elizabeth Welso, Martin O'Malley, Webb, Bernie Sanders just spoke at the National Press Club. There are a lot of people out there that could run and are options. So don't think that the Democrats don't have a bench.
But Armstrong, this is a useful device, isn't it, or a useful cause behind which to galvanise Republicans who, let's face it, they're not exactly one coherent message. They're a very broad church at the moment, and they can galvanise behind this issue and have a pop at the #1 Democratic candidate.
You know, it plays well. It makes sense to people who don't really understand how things work. There's a serious issue here with her emails. No one wants to focus on the fact that credible media and right-wing media are all on the same page. You may say the right-wing media may have their agenda, but there's no way I'm going to believe that the New York Times, with this credibility and this track record with Mrs. Clinton and the Washington Post, would unfairly attack her on their front pages in an editorial. There's a serious breach here that was violated. It should be investigated. She never should have deleted any emails from any account, and there should be an independent body that looks into this. And this story has legs. It's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Jeffrey, okay, if there's an inquiry, would that be a good idea? Have an inquiry into it? It'd take about 3 or 4 years. We'd be none the wiser.
But that's what the Republicans did with Benghazi, wasted a lot of time, wasted a lot of money, come up with nothing. That's what they did with Whitewater, same garbage. The fact is, I love the hypocrisy of saying, oh, the New York Times, they must be right. The Republicans and Armstrong are almost always critical of the New York Times for being, the left-wing media. And we can't trust them. Now they're suddenly trusting them. The hypocrisy is appalling.
Bob Weiner,
let's get the balance.
Can I ask you one final thing?
Can I get the balance in here?
Of course. Bob Weiner, I was going to just ask you, while we've got you here, I know you were mentioning a lot of the other potential candidates for the Democrats next year, but if Hillary Clinton is not damaged by this, does she still stay way out in front in your view?
And she should, by 50 points. She's got so much strength in terms of her background as a senator, Secretary of State, First Lady, all the things that she's accomplished, the remarkable speech that she gave in China on women's rights, our equal rights, and all of that. So, yes, she should be the nominee in my view, but we do have a bench, and you know what? That bench is a good bench for vice president.
Bob Weiner in Washington, thank you very much. There are only 2 weeks to go until the most closely contested presidential election in Nigeria's history. The big issues: terrorism and corruption, from Boko Haram to the instability of the oil-producing Niger Delta. The political fight is between the incumbent, President Goodluck Jonathan, and the lead opposition candidate, Major General Muhammadu Buhari. Who will ensure peace and stability? Well, we can go to Abuja now, the capital of Nigeria, and speak to Dr. Doyin Okupe, who is the official spokesman of Goodluck Jonathan, the Nigerian president. Dr. Okupe, do you think people will vote for more of the same under their present president?
I believe that Dr. Goodluck Jonathan has actually more than enough to deserve a second term. There is, in the history of Nigeria, since our independence, 1960 to date, there's a consensus about, amongst most Nigerians that no president, no head of state, and no government has actually achieved so much as the administration of Goodluck Jonathan in the last 4 years.
And I'm going to bring in my regular guest, Jeffrey Robinson, standing by, and Armstrong. Let's go to you first of all. The biggest test for any presidential candidate is when your country isn't safe. And if you live in the northeast of Nigeria, it's far from safe, Armstrong.
Yeah, and I just want to say, for full disclosure, one of the companies that I own have a relationship with the Goodluck Jonathan. So I just want to make sure that I disclose that for the credibility of this show. Obviously, people are very concerned about what is going on with Boko Haram, and that it has happened on President Goodluck Jonathan's watch. It doesn't seem to be getting any better. And it would be interesting to hear the president's spokesperson to actually talk about what has not necessarily been reported in the media that this president has done to make Nigerians safe. And why is it that innocent children still are kidnapped and killed for no reason at all? And how this plays around the rest of the world is just insane. And it shows the lack of leadership. And if there's something that we don't know about, we certainly would like to have him explain it.
You of all people know very well, what terrorism is all about. Terrorism is presently a global phenomenon. It is not limited to Nigeria, neither is it limited to Africa. But the patent and the way it operates is almost the same. It's an asymmetrical warfare, and it's something that is totally new to us and to our military. There's no doubt about it that at the very beginning, it was difficult for our military to combat it.
Jeffrey, even if you don't live in the northeast, which is grim, isn't it? I mean, in terms of the terror prospect on the border, what should be a prosperous country with a lot of revenue coming in from their oil reserves is also frighteningly not working, in the sense that the corruption and everything means for ordinary citizens life can be really tough.
Absolutely. I was invited to Nigeria some years ago by President Jonathan's predecessor, President Obasanjo, to do a keynote speech on organized crime and money laundering and corruption at a huge national conference that included just about everybody of importance in the country, and met with President Obasanjo privately afterwards for quite a while. And we sat and chatted, and he led me to understand that Nigeria is an invented country. The British actually invented it. They took 4 regions and combined them into one country, when in fact it probably should be 4 countries. When you consider that, the tribal influences, the cultural differences in all 4 areas, and then you add in the military influence in government, and you look at the candidate running against President Jonathan, he's a military man. Obasanjo was a military man. And you then add in the extreme wealth that came from the oil industry and has been mostly squandered through corruption. I came away from my meeting with President Obasanjo believing that Nigeria may well be ungovernable.
That's quite a frightening prospect, Armstrong.
Listen, It is. I've gone to Nigeria within the last 2 years with my brother and our team, and I was a little taken back being there. I just don't. I just don't understand. I mean, a lot of people don't understand whether it is a place of corruption, whether they do empower the people, whether the richest gets richer on the backs of the people, and their people really have no voice. It would be interesting to hear the president's spokesman talk about what is Jonathan actually done for everyday Nigerians who really don't have access to government and the government coffers. What is really being done in terms of infrastructure, in terms of poverty, building things in their communities that can empower them, and what are they also doing to impact the education? Because one of the best opportunities they have of getting out of that situation is a passport through education, whether it's the education system there, because many of the elite in Nigeria, they can go to London for the education, but for the majority, they must stay right there and endure.
We have problems with our Western allies. A few nations did not want to sell ammunition to us, and they were also preventing other nations from selling to us. We have to go through all sorts of ways, including black market, to acquire what we needed to prosecute the war. I can tell you on good authority that as of today, the Nigerian army has been, very well treated, and the result is becoming obvious. Now, in the UK, you may not be aware, but everybody living in Nigeria now knows that in the northeast part of Nigeria, people are now sleeping with their eyes closed.
Thank you very much indeed. We must end our segment there. Dr. Okupe, thank you. There is a thin line between inspiration and imitation. And singer Pharrell Williams and his co-writer Robin Thicke were found to have crossed that line. They were fined more than $7 million for copying a 1977 Marvin Gaye song. So let's bring in Jeffrey and Armstrong. This is music of my era. I remember the original. I don't think they sound very alike at all. What do you think, Jeffrey?
Those of us who write for a living have absolutely no tolerance, nor should we have any tolerance, for the excuse that I was inspired by. No. Plagiarism is intellectual rape. And as somebody who has been plagiarized, my book, The Laundryman, was plagiarized in Holland, and I've had large sections of other books repeated in books. I mean, I go after people with no tolerance at all. My lawyers go after them, and we do what we have to do. The Marvin Gaye family did what they had to do. I have no sympathy whatsoever for the guys who said, well, we were inspired. No. Screw them. They're lucky that they weren't prosecuted for criminal copyright infringement, which exists on a federal level.
Armstrong, would you have gone after them? Would you have launched the action?
Listen, you're talking about a family who was just a giant. Marvin Gaye was a giant in music. And that song, Got to Give It Up, I can't imagine how many times I've danced on the dance floor to that song. And they've lived it. It's their father. They've heard the music. They've seen the original tracks. And there's just no way you cannot listen to both tracks and realize that they just absolutely just stole the soundtrack and made it into their own. And not to go to them and show respect and honor to the legacy of Marvin Gaye, that at least offer to pay them something. I'm sure it would have never been in the millions, but to disregard that and think because of who they are, that they could actually put this song out, make millions of dollars on it, build their brand further, and totally just disregard what Marvin Gaye and his family represented. Noni and her family had every right, because listen, Jeffrey is right. If you're a writer, if you produce television content, if you produce your own jingles, the one thing that can be very hurtful and painful, if somebody just walk in there after you work so hard and labored for so long to produce that work, and you just waltz in there and take a couple hours to steal it. Absolutely, it was the right verdict. I'm sorry.
And Armstrong, let me ask you both about the difference, because, of course, modern music uses sampling a lot. But in American law, if you sample something, you have to ask the original writer, do you, to use that clip?
No question, you must get permission. And to be so arrogant. And also, the family said they were misled, they were lied to, there were negotiations, but they realized they were being exploited and taken advantage of. They did not think that these people would stand up and fight. And listen, there are a lot of cases that would never see the light of day, but this case is a reminder is that you cannot steal somebody's works. I don't care if it's 100 years ago or 100 days ago, and think you can get away with it and not pay for it.
See, Jeffrey, you're taking the litigious line, and I quite understand why you would do that, and right of you to defend it. But I guess most of the kids who bought the Pharrell Williams Happy Hit don't really care. It was just a good tune, and all his music they like, whether he nicked it or not.
Well, yeah, most people don't care. It's the writers who must care, because this is bank robbery. I mean, it's intellectual rape. That's what it is. Unfortunately, under U.S. law, there used to be a clause called sweat of the brow, which meant that you couldn't even come close. Now they've done away with sweat of the brow, and you have to prove that they've actually lifted parts of it. And it's well described in law as to how much you can use under fair usage. The U.S. copyright law and British copyright law really needs to be changed so that writers are protected. And as I say, no sympathy whatsoever. The jury made the right decision. I simply think they should have awarded treble damages.
Jeffrey, good to talk to you. Armstrong, thank you both very much indeed, as ever. That's it for this edition of The Debate. You can continue watching Sky News on Apple TV, Roku, on Catch Up, and of course at skynews.com. Until next time, goodbye.